going to hold it against anyone that was not able to be at this meeting, right? But I just kind of wanted to come together, right? Have a group tag up. And again, I own the miscommunication, problem, right? Sometimes things get lost in translation, like telephone, and I know everybody's still learning. Okay, so we're going to go back to the basics. This is what I did with the other group, and I should have done this with you guys first. Okay, so all right, so let's go ahead and get started, and then of course we'll open it up for questions. I don't want to take up too much of your time, okay? But we need to run through what we're doing first and foremost, right? What that looks like, okay? Why are we even doing it this way, right? Why are we even using CIS, ESAT, and all that, and how the division of controls should be, and also the priority of controls based upon our organization's needs, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Gap analyses, right? So what do you all think is a gap analysis? What do you think it is? Like, what is it? What does it mean to you?
I believe it's basically you're running, you're getting an analysis of the controls that you have in place and the policies and procedures, and you're assessing basically what's not covered, which will be the gap, I guess.
That's exactly right. Yeah, spot on, right? So, it's like you're going to be asked, what are baseline? What's a baseline? People are going to ask you sometimes for evidence, or you're going to ask for evidence. For instance, what are the baseline, vulnerability assessments, right? What are the baseline, right? That's the beginning. So, it's like when you go to a new doctor, right? The first thing they do is, even though you've had blood work done with somebody else, the first thing they do is that initial consultation, right? They want to get to know you. They send you in for blood work, okay? Look at your thyroid, look at your, what is it, A1C or whatever, and all that, right? And then, of course, they either adjust your medications immediately or they wait. And they have you maybe come back in about 3 months, and then they look at the gaps. They do a gap analysis, and they look to see, okay, do I need to make any additional adjustments? Is this person low on vitamin D, right? All these things, right? Does this person have hypothyroid or something else that requires additional review and analysis, right, by a specialist, okay? In essence, that's what you're doing here with compliance, right? Compliance. And within compliance, okay, we use, okay, first we need to understand the scope of what we're looking at, okay? What is the scope, okay? So you need to understand, okay, what do you think the scope, what is our accreditation boundary, do you think? Because see, we didn't define this with you guys initially. I know we said the organization, but this is something that, and I think on week 2, I think I even had on one of the things that doing a data, data analysis, right? Understand even with the data that you're looking at, right? Get acclimated to the environment, right? There was a network diagram in there, so we need to go back to the basics, right? What does our boundary look like, right? What are we even looking at? Okay, what are we looking at? Okay, so we define the scope, and that's with anything, whether it be a penetration test that you're looking at, could be one system, could be multiple systems, right? In our case, we're looking at the entire organization infrastructure, right? Which includes our jump cloud and vCITA and everything else, right? So, and if you look at, it's during this audit cycle, right? So this audit cycle, we might just do, let's just say vCITA. The next audit cycle, we might do, another one of our systems, right? So it just depends on what the organization's recommendation is, also how much they can afford, right? What the requirements are and all that, right? And there's different types, okay, of accreditation boundaries. And there's what we call the type accreditation. It's basically, if you can think of a type accreditation, it's how that system is deployed, right? And all the interoperability. Now, this is not our boundary, but this is an example of a boundary. And if you look at all the interconnections, right, that's why it's important to document our boundary, our assets, right? The CIS controls, what does it say? The first thing is document a list of basically your hardware and software. It's like the first control, right? And it's there for a reason. The top, if you look at the top, it used to be the top 8 or 20. Now it's the top 18 CIS controls. The very first one is understand your assets, right? What you have, what you're looking at, what's in your environment, right? And that includes systems and hardware and software, right? So that's the first thing you guys should do, okay, is list everything we have, okay? And then we look at, right, when we look at type accreditation, it's all, the interoperability components. What are the dependencies, right? Sometimes systems can act as a standalone, right? If that's the main requirement. Others are part of an internetwork of connections, right? Could be multi-site, could be whatever, right? In an accreditation boundary, you might only be tasked to look at one of these, right? This could be a multi-site, right? These are 2 domain controller environments here, but let's just pretend this is Manhattan, 2 buildings. Let's just say this is building 1 and this is building 2, right? Let's just say in New Jersey, this is Manhattan and this is New Jersey, right? And so you might be assigned to look at the entire thing, which could be what we call an ICANN accreditation. You hear that a lot in the Pentagon. They call it ICANN accreditation when they're looking at the entire network. Or you can be looking at a portion of, it could be just the router, it could be just a specific system that's come up under audit, right? And so you might be, like I said, assigned to multiple things or just one thing to look at or whatever. So it's important to know the scope. What are you even looking at? Okay, what are you looking at? What is part of this accreditation boundary, the scope in the audit cycle? That's same thing with penetration tests. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to go ahead because I see, this router here. This isn't part of the scope. It's not part of the approved accreditation boundary and the rules of engagement, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways because, that's, I feel that I'm going above and beyond. No, you don't do that because you've just transitioned from authorized to unauthorized. So it's important to know the scope of the boundary in which you are assessing, okay? And so there's GSS, that's general network basis, the whole thing. It could be a large system, a major system, or a minor system, right? You could be looking at an entire network, a single system or multiple systems, right? It could be a variety of things, okay? So you need to understand that first, okay? So we need to first document that. Now, let's look at, what a system is, right? System and system elements, okay? So, certain parts of our environment of operation may be included in the authorization boundary, right? Could be determined in scope for the authorization or audit or assessment. You're going to hear or gap analyses, right? Same, just different flavors of terminology. While other parts may be excluded, right? So some parts may be in scope, some parts may be out of scope. So, for example, if the facility, like the environment of the operation that provides protection for the system elements is determined to be in scope for the authorization of that system, the physical and environmental protection controls, right, at entry points, perimeter protection devices are all included in the authorization boundary. And therefore, we need to include them in the system security plan, right? If the facility provides physical and environmental protections as common controls, basically they're providing, and there's a dependency on, but they're providing it, right, from an external party, if you will, then they are inherited by the system. So, if this system here element relies on this other system for its inherent, controls like ISP, ASP, right? Internet, we can't do anything without the internet. So that's essentially an inherited, what we call a common control, whereby the ISP, ASP, whether it be AT&T or Verizon or whoever's providing that service, right? Then that's an inherited control because we can't singularly provide our own internet, right? There's a dependency. And so, again, there's system specific, there's controls where only the system's providing it and can within that environment and has the ability to do so. There's also hybrid type of controls where there's a combination of, as you can see, there's a dependency here, right? So there's a dependency on this, right? And then there's inherited, or what we call common controls, where it's done by an external, a cloud service provider, for instance, is an external entity. But I caution you on that because, again, all the answers there are going to be in the contract. And so you have to document then the inheritance, right? Document the implementation. How is it even being implemented? Who even owns the control, right? Externally, internally, one system, multiple systems, etc., right? and the system may also communicate or have, other interactions with enabling systems and other systems that are part of the extended environment of operation, but are outside the scope of authorization for the system, right? So organizations, the organization, we, Cyvergence in this case, are going to determine which parts of the environment of operation are within the authorization boundary, the scope of the gap analysis, the assessment you're currently going to be doing, okay? And these determinations are typically specific to the system, right? Or architecture and are context driven, okay? All right, so we also need to then, once we've established what we're going to be assessing, we need to then choose the framework that we're using, okay? I'm going to discuss a multitude of frameworks throughout this time frame with you, okay? But in this case, you're using two frameworks, CIS framework, and you're going to be using the NIST RMF framework, okay? So those are the two frameworks that we're using. That's important, okay? If you're going through a SOX audit, you're using that framework. If you're going ISO 27001, you're using that framework. So understand the scope of the boundary that needs to be assessed, one system, multiple systems, the entire network. Then, of course, what framework are we using? So in this case, we're using two. So you're learning two at the same time, the CIS framework and the NIST RMF framework, okay, the risk management framework, okay? Is everybody clear so far?
So far, so good.
That is,
yeah,
okay.
yes.
All right, awesome. So then there are, how many steps do you think there are? It used to be just 6 steps. So counting the boxes, how many steps are there in the process?
7.
7, right? 7. So let's walk through them, okay? The first one is prepare, okay? So the first one is prepare to execute the RMF from an organization and a system level perspective by first establishing a context, a boundary, okay? And then the priorities for managing the security and privacy risk, okay? So, and then after we do that, establish the boundary, okay, and the framework, okay? In this case, we decided on CIS and RMF, the NIST, right? Then we're going to categorize the system and the information processed, stored, and transmitted by the system based on an analysis of the impact of loss. So that's using FIPS 199, okay? And the other team already did that, okay? But I'm going to have you guys also run through that process as well. So when I mentioned, the FIPS 199 and it says US aid, that was the template, right? That's what I'm referring to. That's actually doing a data, basically assessment. What types of data are running in our environment, right? You don't just want generalized. You need what types. Yes, we know it's PII, but there's name, there's address, right? There's emails, right? So all these things, right, are indicative of, okay, then what is then the baseline of controls? And when we talk baseline of controls in CIS and NIST, we're talking about high, moderate, and low, okay? So that's important. Why? Because then when we select our initial set of controls for the system, which is what's already been done, but right now, again, some of the stuff has already been done. You're coming in on the monitor phase, but because we're doing a continuous risk assessment, risk identification, okay, and remediation process, we're continuing on this cycle, okay? We're continuing on this cycle. So even though we got to this phase, monitor, right, but many organizations just stop and then they do a snapshot in time assessment and then they stop. They take the findings, and then they start rolling out remediation, but then it stops. Okay, and then they don't start doing these steps until they're due another audit or accreditation, right? In DoD, we call it, ATO, approval to operate, right? And that's not done maybe once a year, once every 3 years, okay? We're doing this continuously. So although we stopped at the monitoring there for a minute, again, we need to continue to, we categorize the system now based upon PII, okay, on the NIST guidance, okay, we're essentially at a moderate level, okay, of controls pursuant to the NIST guidance. However, because, right, so it's, again, up to the organization to what we call tailor in high level of controls. Okay, so we have PHI, we have, in addition to the PII, right, we have IP, right, a lot of the specs and patents and all that stuff for all the coding languages and stuff. I mean, all that's also data that's being housed by, also all the development work, for the two products, the Piranha.ai, which is an IoT IPS, and then the Metaversity XR, which is an EdTech product. And all that, right, is in AWS, a completely different environment. It's not in production, it's in development, right? So it's in development environment, development and test environment. So with that said, right, that's a whole nother area, okay, of controls. But my point to that is that there's a lot of information that needs to be protected. And so with that said, I have decided, okay, to say that we're going to assess ourselves at a high level baseline of controls. Will we meet all of them? Probably not, because a lot of them are more towards the larger enterprise type models or what have you, or government models and stuff. But I want to take us to a higher level of security than just accepting the status quo, right? It's okay to go over. We can't go under, but we can go over, right? Do you guys agree with that, right?
Yes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. So that's why there's more controls in play to assess. Okay, for us. So essentially, selecting our initial set of controls for our system, right? In this case, we're using CIS. I'm going to get into CIS in a minute. And again, we're tailoring the controls as needed to reduce the risk to an acceptable level based on an assessment of risk, right? We're then going to implement the controls. Okay, that's the next step. Okay, and part of that is then describing how the controls are employed within the system and its environment of operation. So when you're in CIS CSAT and all those notes there, right, whether or not it's a policy, it's a procedure, it's an action, like an operation function of a system, then you're describing then implementation. Okay, how is it implemented, or is it implemented? Because if it's not implemented, then you say that too, not implemented, which means we're not compliant with the control. Partially implemented still means, partially still means we're going to fail the control, but you document what's in place, what's not in place. Okay. And then what we do is we assess those controls, okay, to determine if the controls are implemented correctly, operating as needed, right, and producing the desired outcomes with respect to satisfying the security and privacy requirements. Okay. Then after that's done, okay, then what you do is you provide a report of findings, recommendations, and alternatives, okay? And then whoever has the acceptance, a lot of people think that at the cybersecurity professional level, they have the ability to accept the level of risk for an organization. So who do you think in an organization has the ultimate authority for accepting the level of risk in that organization? Is it the security manager? Is it the CISO? Is it the CIO?
CISO.
Who is it?
CEO.
It's the CEO, essentially, yes. Working in concert with the CIO, right, CTO, what have you, right? Now, you can provide what we call the risk executive function to the CISO, right? A lot of organizations will do that, and they'll use the CISO as a scapegoat, okay? In that regard. And they'll say, okay, so we're going to allow you to manage this and accept a level of risk on our behalf. But that's very scary, because if there's no communication between the CISO and the senior leadership team, right, which the CISO is C-suite within itself, but in DoD, the only person that can accept the level of risk is what we call the authorizing official, which is, or designating approving authority is what it used to be called, the DAA. Now it's the AO. And that resides with the CIO, basically. And there could be multiple. There could be a centralized enterprise, CIO, AO, and then there could be multiple like department levels or bureau levels, AOs, right? Because it's very difficult to manage risk across the board. But again, the communication there is key, okay? And so if people are working in silos, not communicating, right, or what have you, I mean, there's no excuse. We should be communicating, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, and the very ugly. Okay. Now, after we've authorized the system, so basically we've assessed the controls, we've authorized the system, or common controls based on a determination that the risk to the organization operates, the operations and the assets, individuals, other organizations, stakeholders, and of course, our nation as well is acceptable, right? Because if we leave our stuff unsecure, right, then anybody can come in, not only attack us, but launch an attack based upon the vulnerabilities we have in our systems for being irresponsible, and go and take what we have, our resources, our stuff, and launch an attack, let's just say to the Pentagon or something else, or even another company, right? So it's all of our job, all of our responsibility to maintain the protections of the global information grid, right, across the board. Now, once we've authorized the system, and that's basically said, okay, we accepted the level of risk, right, we're going to maintain, though, the risk register, right, residual risk register. Luckily for us, right, we use a thing called the CIS CSAT, and I'll get that in a minute. And then what we do is then we monitor from there. So all the stuff, the updates are done, right? Manage what we call our findings, our POAMs, plans of actions and milestones, right? So it's a finding based upon the assessment, those gaps inherently. Okay, those are documented. And as you can see on the CIS CSAT dashboard, kind of like the spider web, right, shows how well we're doing or how well we're not doing, right? So we can then take action and help to prioritize money, resources, and all that, right, to then plug those holes, basically, right? So that's essentially, you know, and then of course, you know, what about the privacy controls? What happened to them, right? So they used to be called out separately in the NIST 800 SP Rev 53 Rev 4 and Rev 5, okay, pursuant to the OMB A130, okay, the Office of Management and Budget that comes out of the White House. Okay, there was an integration that was done of the privacy controls. So even though they're not called out separately, okay, in a separate bin of family controls, they are interwoven across the entire controls framework, if you will, right? So that's inherently what it is across the entire system development lifecycle, okay? So that's, you know, that's where they're at. So they're not called out separately. They used to be, okay? Now, let's talk about CSAT. Like, what is CIS CSAT, which many of you got access to, right? So, you know, it's basically web-based, and I'm going to read it, government off-the-shelf solution that automates a broad range of services for a comprehensive, fully integrated cybersecurity management, including controls, scorecard measurement, dashboard reporting, and the generation of risk management framework package reports, okay? Now, because we're using CIS CSAT, we're using, you know, of course, the CIS controls, you know, version 8 or 8.1, right, which is the newest one out there, okay? But we're crosswalking it to the NIST, you know, SP 853 Rev 5, right? Now, with the controls assignments, okay, because I know there's a lot of questions. Now, we're a couple weeks behind, okay? I don't blame anybody but me. Again, I take ownership of all of that because, again, the buck stops with the leadership, me, because I don't blame anybody else because everybody else also is still learning as well. So understanding you're still learning and everyone's still learning, the controls assignment priority is as follows. So the CM family needs to be done. Why? Because that was a huge gap in the last assessment, okay? And CM is configuration and change management, right? So dealing with document control, you know, version control, but also the configuration baselines of our systems, right? What have you. So all of that is inherently important, okay? And that's a huge gap that we need to fill. So, you know, I am an expert in that area. And so instead of everyone kind of flailing like a fish out of water, I'm just going to go and help that team. I understand that's team 5 that has a CM family, right? So that's the first priority in the assignment priority, okay? And again, they're going to be in the CIS nomenclature. I get it because we're dealing with the CIS CSAT dashboard. The second priority, right, is then the controls that have not yet been assessed. So again, starting off with the CM family first, and anything else that hasn't even been looked at yet or gotten to. And then the next phase is validation. Now, essentially, when you validate, okay, there's normally an assessor or an auditor that does the, you know, documentation of the controls, and then there's the validation. So that's why independent verification and validation, right? So that can't be a conflict of interest. It's basically QC, right? It's validating your inputs, right? The evidentiary artifact that you've uploaded. Let's just say it's a policy, right? You put the title of the policy, the date of the policy, right? Whether it's compliant or not compliant, or, you know, you upload it and say it's missing A, B, C, and D. You have to be as specific as possible. You can't be generic with it. Be very specific in what you're analyzing and what the gaps are specifically, so that when they are assigned to somebody within the organization to fix it, whether or not it's changing a sentence in a policy to include, let's just say, ransomware or whatever, right? how we're dealing with ransomware, like I say, in incident response plan and procedures, et cetera, right? You know, and that's why I had you start off with the IR. Essentially what you did, the first thing as part of that incident response exercise, okay, that assignment was to do a gap analysis. You were looking at our current incident response policy procedures as a cybergence organization. You're looking at, okay, based upon the questions, inherent, and again, additional NIST IR guidance, what's missing, what's there, and then what's not there, okay? Because if it's not there, you're supposed to make a recommendation then. I did not see this here, so this is what I'm going to recommend based upon this guidance, this page, this paragraph or whatever. It recommends that you do this specifically. So this is what I recommend then based upon that guidance to improve your policy or procedure, right? And specific policy name and date, right? Or the procedure that you looked at and what needs to be improved, okay? We don't go by generics here. We go by details. We go by specifics, right? What have you? Because we're not, we know a lot of cybersecurity professionals get paid 6 figures plus. So trust me, we're not paying you like to just go something we can just Google ourselves. We're paying you to provide tailored specific guidance for that specific organization, that specific technology, that specific system, those specific data types, right? It's incredibly important to help us not only become compliant, but maintain compliance based upon, you know, whether it be PCI DSS, and I'll cover that in the future or not. But, you know, I cover that in the future, okay? But right now, I just want you guys to concentrate on, you know, again, the 2 frameworks, CIS and the NIST, okay? Now, the presentation format, what does that look like? So first of all, you know, it's what are the controls you're even looking at? Okay, so that's what you're going to put on the presentation or speak to from the CIS CSAT dashboard. You can do that. Okay, you can pull up your control. Everybody can kind of share you know, only one person can present at a time. So if you're doing it as a team, you know, but I want everyone to get, you know, I want everyone to kind of get practice, okay, on presenting. That's important because that's a lot of what we do is we present risk. We talk about things. And so you can't get around that. I'd rather have you flail in front of us than go out when you finally get that paid opportunity, right, and flail in front of them, right? So I don't grade on, like, let's just say you're nervous, you forget everything. I don't grade on that. What I grade on is the content of the information you're providing. Did you do a detailed enough analyses? That's what I use. Or did they half you know what it? Because I don't want you as part of the team. Nobody's going to want you as part of the team if you just half you know what it, right? Cybersecurity is a very important thing. There's people dying. There was a case in Germany, for instance, as an example, right? For there was a ransomware attack that occurred and it caused the ambulance, okay, that was en route with the patient to go to that closest hospital. And because that closest hospital was hit with a ransomware attack, that ambulance with that patient was diverted to a further hospital and the patient died. So this has already affected lives, folks. This is nothing to play around. This is almost like being a guard, right, in front of your platoon and sleeping on the job. Right. And then there's a breach. OK, who's responsible then? You, because you let your guard down. Like, what the heck, man? So, you know, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a cybersecurity professional at whatever level you're at. OK, so your job then is to say, OK, these are the controls that I had assigned to me. This is the specific control or controls I'm going to talk to today. OK, these are my findings. OK, which are those gaps or whatever, or the fact that maybe it is compliant. This one's compliant, right? You meet all the requirements, okay? This one, though, however, that I'm going to talk about, here's the control, here's a couple of recommendations, right? Here's the finding, here's the problem, and then the recommendation solution, okay? Then after that, we're going to update, right, the CIS CSAT dashboard. So what's the next step? Okay, you found the problem. Now what do? Just leave it, right? If there's a policy that needs to be written, guess what? You're going to work with folks to document the policy, and you're going to follow the NIST 853 Rev 5 because it has specific, all the AC-1, SC-1, those are policy procedure guidance, purpose, scope, all that, and it says exactly what should be in there. See, that's why I always point to the NIST 853 Rev 5. When we talk about ISO 27001 Annex A in the near future, again, there's a crosswalk even to that from the ISO 27001 Annex A, which is very high level summarized, to the NIST 853 Rev 5, because that is strong, robust, detailed supplemental recommendation, recommended guidance for how to implement, right? How to even solve the problem. You look at it in there, right? So, all right. So, and of course, we discussed next steps, action items, right? How and then an estimated completion date, right? When are we going to have it completed, right? A month, 2 months, a week. I can do that tomorrow or whatever, right? But give yourself a little bit of a buffer. Also discuss and make a recommendation whether or not it's critical, high, moderate, or low, right, in your analyses. Okay. Just make an educated guess. I think this is a critical finding because, and provide a justification. I mean, everybody thinks all controls are critical, and that's the case, right? Criticals, highs, moderates, and lows all need attention, absolutely. But when you can gig them in those buckets like that, it helps an organization better prioritize time, people, and money in that area to fix the risk, right? If there's a technology that you're recommending, okay, you're gonna do a cost benefit analysis, and I have in the near future weeks, I don't know if it's this week or next week, I forgot, but I will be doing a cost benefit analysis training, okay, and that you will then learn how to do a cost benefit analysis. It's basically taking 3 similar technologies, and you do a breakdown. You try to get quotes from 3 different ones. But you look at, interoperability. Is it even interoperable with the stuff we're using? I mean, all of it, compliance, the training aspect, right? How long it's going to take to implement, what's the cost of day 1, year 1, is it scalable, et cetera, right? So there's different things, and then you make a recommendation, right? This is the highest cost, but lowest and best product based upon these elements that we have recommended. This is the lowest, this is the highest risk, highest cost, or this is the lowest risk. You just do it like that, right? All right, so let's talk about deadlines, because there are deadlines, okay? Weekly Wednesdays, you're gonna brief status, okay? Like tomorrow, obviously you're gonna have, well, I just got my controls assigned. Okay, so tomorrow what I'm gonna ask everyone is, has everyone gotten their controls assigned? Okay, and everybody should say yes at that point. So that's the goal, right? Because we've already missed 2 weeks, folks. Okay, it's not rocket science. All right. Then the next ITCCB is not this Friday, but the following Friday, because this Friday is a career AMA. So you'll have a week and a half then to review said controls. You can start off with 1 control initially, or a couple controls, or whatever. And then you're going to then present those at those biweekly ITCCBs. Now, for those that cannot make it, we'll need to still return a recording, okay? A 3-minute recording of said presentation, And again, they can use the CIS CSAT dashboard and walk through, right, their control. This is the finding, this is a recommendation, this is alternative, whatever they're saying, right? So they can turn in a recording, okay? But preferably, right, if you really want to practice, you need to practice live. Why? Because everyone, gets nervous. Shoot, even I get nervous. Everyone gets nervous. It's normal, completely normal. Some people have never even presented before in their life other than back in elementary school or whatever, and that's okay too. So what I do here as part of the program is I help you with your confidence and gain confidence in your ability to present risk to executives. Okay, so you will obtain that, trust me, by the end here, because all of you, even those of you that roll over to SOC in now week 9, because we're 2 weeks behind, you're still going to be part of the GRC component with the controls. Don't think that you're going to just, because this is what happened last time, right? Some folks just sat on the controls, didn't do anything. So let me let the time tick off until later when we're able to do the red team, or we're able to do this later or whatever, right? Some people did that. No, don't do that, because you will work yourself out of an opportunity with us, because again, you're leaving risk open. GRC, just because you enter a SOC analyst position or a penetration tester position doesn't mean GRC goes away at all, right? In fact, it's even more important right at that point. Okay, and then controls deadlines. So all the controls that you've been assigned, okay, within reason, right, are due by your 8th week, okay? Your 8th week. Why? Because I don't want people just sitting on it, biding the time, okay? Those of you that want to pursue being SOC analyst, I need you to actually get your hands dirty, right? Roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and really dive in with scuba gear and learn, so that when you then, and again, you're still going to have GRC controls even through the end of the end of it, because you're still going to practice presentation, because the more you do it, the better you get. Okay. And then as you get in the SOC, there's even questions in the end of shift report about what technologies can we automate, perhaps? Do you have any recommendations? For at least there's AARs in those end of shift reports, and all that. So, and you're going to go through, and there's even walks through, a lot of that GRC stuff, because you're looking at continuous improvements, right? And areas in which we can adopt to improve upon our risk posture. That's our primary mission, is to protect the data processed or transmitted. Okay. So with that said, okay, that's the end of the presentation. I know that was a lot. I'm gonna actually share out a copy of it with you, okay, in the MS Teams. Okay, so you guys can go back, and this is of course recorded. Yeah, so tonight, the goal, folks, between today and tomorrow, right? You should be assigning controls. Okay. Now the RACI chart, the reason why, the RACI chart and the project team charter, okay, that's for projects. Okay, that's for projects. Okay, I want you to kind of put that aside for a moment. The reason why I didn't introduce that this time is because I didn't want to confuse people, and I knew exactly when I saw that, even though I love Marlon very much, I think he's awesome, but I knew at that very moment there was going to be some confusion. Okay, because the folks that have been here for a little while, they get it because they've been here. But again, you have to remember, going back to day one, right? Starting with the basics, the building blocks, right? A lot of the folks in the fall internship program don't have that yet. That's what we're building, okay? So, and no problems if you make mistakes. And the CIS said that's okay. Again, you can't delete anything, okay? Honestly, they're there, okay? It's data integrity is intact. So that's why I say, make sure you're writing in there professionally, because that is going to be historical data, right? So make sure, as correct as it can be. I'm not perfect either anymore. I'm not expecting perfection at all, but at least detailed analysis of that specific control. Okay, upload of, or a link to the specific policy, procedure, or whatever it was, okay, that you were looking at, whatever it is. So that at least when somebody goes in there, they say, okay, this person did their due diligence on that specific control. Okay. So yeah, and again, this is a real company, so it's not even like this is a use case. This is an actual real live use case you get to use with real risk, right? Real compliance objectives to me, right? And all that, which is awesome, because it's not like it's an emulated thing at all. And that's why I say you really need to take it seriously, regardless of whether or not it was an emulated environment or not, right? So with that said, are there any questions?
I've got a question. Actually two.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the hangups that we ran into was the CIS to NIST mapping document. There's two different ones out there, and the one that I believe many people are looking at, it has our primary controls, but there's another one that has secondary controls. And the issue that we're running into is, for me, for instance, one of my 4 control families is PE. And basically I can't, it's not populating, PE's not populating in the document that we were using, but it's populating in this other document that has secondary controls. So one of the issues was that we were talking with Eric yesterday was, which one are we supposed to use? And he was supposed to be getting in with Marlon to find out like what's going on. So as of right now, long story short, I've done my RACI chart so I can assign the controls to people, but as far as the PE control family, I don't have anything for it.
Okay, so you do need to do the primary and secondary controls, okay? Mm-hmm. So you absolutely need to do that, right? And so when we're looking at PE though, okay, we're looking at PE, the PE actually controls are pretty much already been done. So all you should be doing is validating what's already been done, because that was Genevieve Hales and some other folks that actually worked on the PE family of controls, and they actually did a really good job. So okay, when you go and validate those, and yeah, you do use the primary and the secondary, right? The technical, mm-hmm, operational, and management controls. So it's everything. Okay. So you use that secondary list, okay, that's provided, not just the high level one. And if you need to validate that, because there's always ways in which we can improve the documentation as well, is you can look just straight at the CIS, right? Because they have the breakdown right there. So you can't miss it. So you can actually even validate against the documentation, right? And so we're using version 8.1 now. So the documentation you have may not even be updated to that, because we were using the 7, I think it was 7.1 was the last version. Now we're at 8.1. It just, made that update. CIS just made that update. So that's another thing to take and consider, consideration. But excellent question. You use the primary and secondary controls. The PE family, though, think in the terms of BYOD, right? So we have an IS, infrastructure as a service, as part of our jump cloud environment, okay? And so the Active Directory, domain controllers, the firewalls, the routers, all that stuff is maintained by Jump Cloud itself. It's part of the infrastructure, okay? They're an external cloud service provider that we use, okay? We have access to the dashboard. Now we manage our systems, our own systems, right? That kind of thing. We manage GPO and those types of things. So when we're talking about PE, that's physical and environmental controls, fire suppression and stuff like that. So I had the guidance. I had the audit from Jump Cloud. Let me go see if I can find it. I don't know if that got transferred over from Nifty PM, because that was the database of record we were using for our documents. So everything got kind of transferred over to SharePoint. Let me see if that got transferred over. But that's what you want to do. Anytime there's an external cloud service provider, an external provider at all, is you need to look at, okay, what are they providing, really what they're not providing, because we can assume they're doing backups, for instance. We can assume, right, they're doing this, that, and the other, but they may not. And that's the problem a lot of people have. They just assume when they hire an external cloud service provider or a provider that they're covering everything, like backups and everything else. So what are they backing up? Are they backing up our systems? No, they're not. Are they backing up our logs? Yes, they are, right? But how long are they backing up the logs, right? That kind of, you know what I mean? Those types of things. So, and again, those backups, there's also controls in reference to the backups. Use the NIST. There's a BYOD guidance in NIST, right? Kind of help you with BYOD, and kind of work to look at those that may pertain to the physical and environmental controls, and see if we left anything out, right? Like remote policy, right? We have some of those, okay? Remote access policies and stuff. But we've also updated. We're no longer using Slack. We're using MS Teams and stuff. So you're going to see that too, as we've changed a little bit technology, right? You're going to see that also needs to be updated, right? In the controls implementation as we document them, and also similarly, our thank you, Ian. So and as we, like I said, as you look at the policy procedures, like I said, if you see an update. We also did a renaming, right? So we renamed ourselves from Chrysalis.ai, which was my former company name, to Cyvergence.ai. So you're probably going to see some policy procedures still with Chrysalis.ai. If that's the case, bring it to our attention so we can get it updated, right? And just update it with the gap. So I hope that provides a little more guidance. Go ahead.
It does, but it brings me to another question though. How does that work as far as me assigning stuff in CIS? Because say our secondary control, our PE secondary control is somebody else's, like CM's primary. That means they're going to be, that's already going to be assigned from one of their people, right?
That's correct. Yes. And therefore, that's why the cross-functioning, that's why I did not want the siloed, because again, that's why you need a so somebody that has a related control like that, you're going to work with that other team, right? After the other person that has it assigned, right, to ensure that, you all are on the same page. Just like, because they're going to look at a portion, you're going to look at a portion, right? And therefore you can kind of, and you're going to have a difference of opinion, which is normal. Document it. Let's talk about it. That's what the ITCCB is for, right? Let's talk about it. And that's what the GRC meetings are for. Let's talk about it. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why there's the Cyvergence GRC team. So then you can say, in there, who has, well, actually, you can see actually what team has it. So the team leads then would say, okay, who specifically was, assigned this specific controls, so that I can also, you can also sync your teams together, right? So those people, those members. And so there's going to be a lot of that, a lot of overlap, a lot of That's supposed to work cross-functionally. So that's why when on the resume and the requirements to say, required to work cross-functionally, that's exactly what you're doing. And you're working cross-functionally with the existing GRC team that's been here for a while. You're working cross-functionally with the SOC team. You're working cross-functionally with the executive team, right? What have you. So, yeah, you just have to kind of identify who that person is or whatever that has those controls, those secondary controls, or vice versa, and then marry them up so they can kind of work together. So they'll be working within their teams, but also be working with other members of other teams in order to conduct their analyses and come up with a recommendation. And
so basically,
yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, say I assign that control to one of my people, even though it's not assigned to CIS, they're still gonna do, they're gonna do their the crosstalk, and they're gonna basically work with each other come time for presentation. If that's one of the controls, our person, even though they're not assigned, they're gonna be like, hey, I was this is my secondary control. I worked with such and such. This is what we came up with. Is that how that's gonna work?
That's exactly it. And you're also going to see in the NIST 853 Rev 5 guidance, you're going to see associated controls, right? Or similar controls. And so you're going to look to that and just bounce that off, right? If it's something that's just say of CM and that CM controls is also with PE, but that also mentions an AC because there's access control, right? Is also part of PE too. It's entering a data center or entering a home, whatever, into this, so all that. And that's what you do. You just kind of cross correlate, if you will, information and just make sure all the dots are crossed, or all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. There we go.
I got you.
And spit it out. Yeah. So that's how we do a detailed analysis so we don't miss anything because it's really easy to miss something, right? And if we only do the high level, if we only do the primary and not the secondary controls, then we miss out on those underlying elements that there may be gaps we may overlook. And again, our job, which is very difficult, by the way, it's very stressful, cyber, because it's not just you. There's a whole team of people, okay, working to secure systems, right? And so it's all about risk management. And so you have different people doing their operations, development, if you're developing, of course, and all that, cyber, but everyone, within the infrastructure, okay, physical and logical controls, right? You have to make sure all the doors are shut, all the windows are shut, like there's no even hole where a mouse can even chew through, right? Or termites can get through, right, in that house. Because any little thing that you kind of overlook, which could be just a tiny little configuration setting, let's just say an Active Directory, right? Say, okay, that's low. You figure, okay, I'll overlook that. But that low can end up being high because guess what? That's that little itty bitty openness. We have to close everything. The hacker only needs one little thing to find a way in, and then boom, we're done. Now, is there a perfect network infrastructure? No, there's not, but that doesn't mean you overlook anything. So as you see things identified as gaps, right, we're managing our risk register, residual risk, that's our residual risk, right? That was found as part of the last assessment. So as you're going through there, it's a snapshot in time. Okay, maybe it was a hole then, maybe we've done something now where now it's compliant, or even vice versa, because that happens too a lot, where it was compliant during the assessment or audit, but now it's not compliant 6 months later. That happens a lot. So that's why doing a continuous risk assessment, risk identification, risk remediation is incredibly impactful because it's a lot more efficient way of continually keeping your eye on the ball, any risk, and not missing out on any blind sides. And then discussing, that's why we have the ITCCBs, we have our relevant stakeholders, right? We talk, we even have a pre-meet with the team leads. And by the way, I need to invite you guys now because you guys are gonna be part of that. But then we talk about it from that perspective, right? And we kind of look at, and you never know. I mean, there could be something that we're missing. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I didn't even think about that. Duh, right? Like the MTP, audit of the, it's like, duh. I mean, what the heck, man? And even me. I mean, it's easy to overlook stuff. So that's why, as a team, communication is key, and just continue to keep your eye on the ball, right? To identify ways in which you can improve upon not only efficiencies for the organization, communication, and of course, mitigating risk on everything across the board and all the way down to firmware. I mean, everything, even your peripherals at home that you have plugged up into your, people can go and do war dialing, right? What have you. So there's a lot of that, and your scanners and your printers and stuff can be hacked. Anything with an IP address can be hacked. And there's voice and data. okay, voice and data that need, voice data and network data, right? That needs to be, and system data, right? That needs to be, and everyone at home that has VoIP, right? Anybody with a digital, nobody has analog anymore, really, right? So everybody's using the digital phone. Well, guess what? Those digital phones have IP addresses. So again, you need to look at that. So when you're looking at physical and environmental controls, look at everything that's on that person's desk, right? And then we can document then what are allowed, right, or are approved, even on the desktop. Like, some folks are gaming off their desktops, but if they install something that's unsecure and it's hooked up to our network in Jump Cloud, that puts all of our stuff at risk. So we need to also come up with authorized. You'll see that too. These are all controls, right? And so one of you is going to have, you have an authorized list or even an unauthorized list of software. Now we can't do unauthorized list of software. That's, to me, that is the most asinine ask of a control, because there's no way to list all the unauthorized lists of technology. Give me a break. But what you can do then is say, this is the approved baseline. So working with the CM family of controls, this is the approved applications, if it's on your phone, approved software applications on your desktop. This is the approved operating system, the approved data at rest, right, tool, and what version to use, right? So that we give guidance so nobody's going outside that wire, if you will, and stepping on a landmine, right? Because, we do it all the time. So, but again, we all have to look, and then our SOC is there, right? Because it's 24/7, 365. So we're looking at the cyber hygiene. So you guys are looking at it from the controls perspective, and then the SOC, they're looking at now the technical perspective. They're looking at, okay, let me look, does this data at rest, okay? Does this machine meet that requirement? And data at rest, right? It's SC-28, right? In the NIST 853 family of controls. And then there's VPN, right? We still haven't found a VPN solution, but a lot of that's budget. So again, we don't have a centralized VPN in place. That's SC-8. But what kind of VPN solution then can we use? What's the compensating control? Okay, and we've tossed a lot around, right? And has to meet HIPAA requirements, et cetera, right? OpenVPN does not meet HIPAA requirements, even though it's free. Okay, so you got to look at it from that perspective too. It would be great, right? But then you got to look at convenience, FICE, compliance. Okay, and sometimes there's a compromise, sometimes there's not, right? So they all cost. I don't care if it's $4 per person, $8 per person. If we have over 100 people, let's just say within the organization, even 50 people within the organization, $8 times per person, right, per user, right? It's a lot of money, right, per month. Okay, so the compensating control could be that everyone install or use a specific list. We'll say, okay, they can use either Norton 360 VPN, they can use the McAfee, because McAfee antivirus has a VPN, Aura, right now I'm using Aura, AURA, right? And you can use that singularly, at least, so the geotagging is not being done. Like right now, you can see in the SOC thing, I get pinged all the time and say, I see you logging in from Washington, I see you logging in Chicago, is that you? That's my VPN, right? So it's obscuring it's anonymizing my location, for instance, and some other things. So that's a way we can put a compensating control, is at least if everybody's using an approved VPN at home, at least, even though it's not centralized, okay, at least it's a compensating control to minimize the risk. Does it completely, take that risk away? No, the risk is still there because it's not centralized, but at least it minimizes that risk, at least, and knocks off a certain things. So we're not leaving it wide open, right? Because that's data in transit, because that helps us to establish an IPsec tunnel in which to communicate, right? So we're not doing it centrally, but at least individually, you're okay. Does it meet the requirement altogether? No. But does it lower the risk? A little bit, right? And I'll take that, right? Because again, a lot of times too, it comes down to, but trust me, I would love to have like all this awesome stuff that even I've played with in industry. But the important thing you need to realize is that you cannot dictate to somebody what tool they use when you do an audit. Okay, you say this is the whole. Okay, I recommend a SIM. Okay, let's just say we didn't have any logs, right? We're capturing logs in Jump Cloud, so we have a SIM, right? But what do we not have, right? So are we meeting the AU-6 requirement right now as we speak? Yes, we are. Are we meeting the data retention requirements for logs? Yes, we are. And all these stuff. So you look at, okay, based upon compliance, are they meeting the control or not, based upon what they have in place? Because just saying you need to use QRadar or Splunk, that's the best business practice. That's like the Tim the Toolman Taylor approach. And you don't necessarily need that. That's almost a nice to have. Okay. So you look at the need versus the want. and see, okay, are they even meeting the minimum controls requirements first? Because that's you want to assess first, okay? And then you identify the ones that we're not meeting, because those then are the priority based upon what you guys are recommending, critical, high, moderate, or low. And then we can put money to that so that we are assigning our budget and resources effectively to at least plug those holes. Then we can always go back and identify, okay, to get to business of practice here, we can actually do this. We're meeting the minimum requirement now, like for SIM, but what else can we do? We can actually incorporate SOAR or EDR on top of that, okay? But that's not what NIST says. NIST says, do you have a SIM? Do you have an audit log mechanism that's aggregating data? Is it retaining logs for a certain period of time, right? All that kind of stuff, right? Are you tracking this, that, anything? We are. We're doing all those things. We're meeting those requirements, okay? We're just not using Splunk to do it. We're using Jump Cloud. Is Jump Cloud perfect? Absolutely flipping not. So again, there's features, functionality, and limitations anyways. So that's why I always tell everyone, look at the features, functionality, limitations, and also to save money, okay? Look at stuff we're doing, or look at something we already have before you recommend another technical solution, right? That costs obviously money and time to set up and implement. Look at what do we have in-house that we're already using that maybe we can use that, right, to mitigate that control, mitigate that binding, right? Like Semantic Enterprise, Department of State. I always use this example because there's a requirement as tripwire, right? It's locking down at the registry, okay, the configuration baselines, so it couldn't be manipulated, right? You locked that bad boy down, okay? So we were using Semantic Enterprise, right? Semantic Enterprise, right? For everything that was on Active Directory, we're using Semantic Enterprise, okay? Great antivirus tool solution. Who would have thought that after we did the review, we did a cost benefit analysis, tripwire was ungodly expensive, okay? Even for Department of State standards, okay? So when we're looking at that, it's like, oh my God, that's a lot of money, okay? We're looking at several different types of tools. AIDE was another one that we're looking at. So, and then talking to, we say, okay, let's look at what we have in-house first, and come to find out, pursuant to our analyses, is that talking with Symantec, they actually had features we just had to enable and push out to the entire enterprise and enforce to actually do that very thing. Okay, is lock down the configuration baseline at the registry settings and what have you. Cool, right? Now, then you look at all the other machines, all like the legacy stuff, because that's the ugly you're going to have in your environment. It's not all going to be modernized, okay? Some old like GOTS, okay? Homegrown stuff that is not maintained by a vendor, right? We, the government, are the vendor in that case. So, but then it's not interoperable or compatible with, you know, even Symantec, because we didn't even have Semantic Enterprise on there because it wasn't compatible, right? So those were often a different segment. That's when we teach you about segmentation, VLANs and stuff like that. It's an excellent way to do that. If you lock those things down, put additional controls around it, different parameter within our environment, right? But we were able to then we had to use AIDE because we couldn't use Symantec. But instead of spending, let's just say $120,000 per year, let's just say, and that's being very, very moderate, if you will, we were able to spend $120,000 or a subset of that, if you will, just for those machines that we had to secure with AID instead of spending that amount of money per year for the entire enterprise, right? So we saved money, saved the Department of State. Are you kidding? You look like a king, right? They like roll out the red carpet when you save money, right? Because that's the language that the executives know is, okay, what's the bottom line? I get it. What's the bottom line? We've been doing like this forever. Why should I take money from my profit gen out of my business to then do this, right? To do this when we've been doing this like this the whole time and nothing's ever happened, right? You'll hear that a lot. We've been doing it like that all the time. That doesn't make it right though, right? So anyways, I need you guys to look outside the box, okay? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ping each other. You're not in competition. I mean, yes, we have the higher points, but that's individual points based upon the deliverables, okay? And we're going to tally the points. But just do the best you can. Work with each other, phone a friend, phone each other, have sessions outside, so again, the CM person or the PE, right, control, maybe that was a sign that is associated with the CM specific control, right? Then, have an outside meeting or whatever to discuss those controls and then upload, update your controls accordingly in the CIS set dashboard. And then you guys are briefed, and guys can brief together. You guys can then either do a recording, or you guys can actually say, hey, we would like to brief together. Only one person can present at a time, so just identify who's going to present. And then, you can present your PE control and the other person can present their CM control right there. We've decided collectively, and it actually makes it a lot more credibility, right? And robust in your recommendation, because now it's two people that agree upon. And it's like, okay, I didn't look into that from that perspective, right? So excellent recommendation. So, and then we talk action items, the next step. So what do we do to fix it then, right? And when do we start fixing it, all right? And that's what we do to manage our findings. And so we can continue to mitigate risk. Okay. We can do it in a lot more agile way because we are smaller business. A lot more larger entities like government and all that. It's a lot of bureaucracies. There's a lot of, even to get something minimal approved, it's like, oh my God, it could take months or whatever. Okay. We're able to do a lot more agile here. So when there is something that's get brought up that's critical, then we take action. The entire team will tell you. We take immediate action to mitigate that risk. I don't wait, right? I don't wait at all. Unless it's a huge money thing, then we got to look at, what can we put in place at least to minimize the risk, right? To at least lower the risk, and then we still watch that, right? And we put in monitoring controls, right? That's the monitor, right? That's, the monitoring controls. So which one is that? It's this one, right? So then we monitor it. Right? And that's the SOC part. We use the SOC to do that. We monitor those controls, right? So that's what we do. And then for GRC, we do this continual cycle, right? SOC is here. This is where SOC sits, okay? So they monitor our data, right? Our systems and stuff, and they report back if there's something not compliant. Like I just switched over to another device myself, right? And it's not compliant, right? With the operating system, I have to update the operating system, and so I can install, the data at rest that we've decided on that's compliant. That's AES 256-bit compliant, right? Data at rest, and do the whole drive, not just a partition, right? I'm using the Microsoft Home. That's typically speaking what a lot of you have when you get something from Best Buy or whatever. It's going to be the home, Microsoft, home version, and that is not compatible with BitLocker. It's not. Okay, so you have to then upgrade to the Windows 11 Pro, okay, and there is a link, so you haven't already gotten it. Everybody's been circulating it. So for a minimal price, so you have to pay the full price, and then you update your machine to Windows 11 Pro, so that then you can enable the BitLocker, right, establish the keys, stuff like that, right on the whole drive, SDE, full disk encryption, not just a partition, because somebody else then can hack into the other partition, believe it or not, right, or whatever. There's a lot of stuff that can be done. So we do the full disk encryption, and that is best business practices. That absolutely meets that requirement with the SC-28 control. And you'll see that when you start looking at the NIST and the CIS controls. Why did I have you look at the NIST as well as CIS? Well, number one, you're learning two frameworks at the same time. But number two, even with CIS, which has a lot of data and guidance, my entire career, the best thing that I've seen since, I'd say Rev 3, because Rev 1 and Rev 2 of the 853 sucked, I'm not gonna lie. But there's public comment, it always comes out with open public comment. So, if you don't like what you're seeing, don't just gripe about it, right? Provide recommendations. You may not get credit for it, but I'm on the circular, so I get the stuff, and then, something else will come out, whether it be AI guidance or whatever. Provide recommendations, right? And then they update it, and you'll see there's a lot of stuff because the entire community, both government and non-government, have actually provided recommendations to continually improve the documents. And so now we have Rev 5, which is a lot better. At least it doesn't leave things open for question. Like used to be, the other one would leave you open for interpretation, and privacy controls didn't actually get included until Rev 4. Okay, but there were separate families of controls. Now they're just interwoven into the existing families. So they're not called out specifically, but in the wording. So you'll see that as all of you start diving in, you'll see them called out in the wording of those controls requirements as they're asking, are we compliant with this, that? You'll see that. You'll see that at that time. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. I'm going to ask that all of you, again, try to get assigned the controls, Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get them assigned so people can start looking at and diving in. Okay, that's the thing. And then tomorrow night, again, I'll be asking, is everybody assigned controls? It's either going to be yay or nay, right? And then at that point, because you will have been looking at the controls, then you can ask additional questions because you'll have a lot more context then. What does this mean? What does that mean? Those are the type of questions I want tomorrow, because then people are actually diving into their controls. And so then I can give you guidance, specific guidance and about those controls that then you can take and use that next week and a half to start doing your analyses, making sure you're on the right track. And then you'll be able to present, right, come the next ITCCB, right? So you see there's a method to my madness, probably more madness than method. That's what I used to joke about in the last internship. But if you trust the process, there is a process. Okay, there is. And I need the current folks that are here, which I love you guys. I think you guys are great. But remember, these folks are coming in where you were 6-7 months ago, right? Completely lost in the sauce, which is completely normal. And so as we are providing guidance to them, we need to kind of walk through what that looks like, the process and stuff, and hold everybody's hand for a little while so everybody kind of gets their feet wet, and then you'll start finding your rhythm, right? Your battle rhythm, and then you'll be good. For the next couple weeks, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm so confused. So, and that's okay. I apologize for miscommunication. I do. Again, I take ownership of that. I think the team that we have is awesome, so I'm not trying to take away from any of the members of the current team. I think you guys are rock solid, but I just need you guys to remember these folks are coming in like literally cold, and just before we kind of we just need to take a moment and dissect in and out, the processes in bite-sized chunks. And I failed to do that initially because I did this with them. Okay, it looked a little bit different because I did a different presentation, a little bit different, but I updated it based upon our new color schema. But anyways, I should have done this with you, and I did not do that. And so again, I take ownership of that. All right. So and again, if you make a mistake, just own it. Hey, I made a mistake. Okay, let's talk about it, and let's not a problem. So I'm not going to get mad at you. I mean, you can't delete it. The controls, they're in there. The data integrity is definitely there. So for those of you that have the data integrity type of controls, that's definitely there in that system. That's for sure. It's got MFA, it's got all that. So yeah, you can't delete it. So I'm not worried about you deleting it. I'm just worried about you guys just doing a detailed analysis. And don't be afraid to even disagree with what's in there. I expect you to do that because you might have a difference of opinion or where we're at compliance right now. Again, these are snapshot in time. What was done 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year could be inherently like night and day different by the time you go look at it again, right? So keep that in mind. I mean, no problem. Just brief on it. Brief of where we're at, snapshot in time. Are we compliant or not compliant? And if we're not compliant, what is the level of risk that you think based upon your analysis? Is it critical, high, moderate, or low? Okay. And why? Okay. And what your recommendation would be? What is the problem anyways? And then what's the solution? That's what a recommendation is. Just what is your recommendation? What should we do about it? Right. To fix it. That's what we do. So is there clearer?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes.
Oh,
look, it's like your all-star team, right? Yeah, like playing basketball, right? So those of us that played any type of sport, okay, I'm going to just mention basketball because that's what I played, okay, specifically. But like, you go in, you're the starter team, right? And say you're a point forward or whatever. Look, you're going to foul, okay? So if you're not fouling, you're doing something wrong because you're not taking action forward, right? So you're going to make mistakes. You're going to trip all over yourselves. Okay, that's to be expected. And if you're not, right, we learn from failure too, by the way. So we learn from failure, right? That our most recent mistake is our best teacher, okay? So I'm not expecting perfection at all. I'm not even going to judge you or grade you on perfection. I'm looking at quality and content. The content, the analysis, was it deep enough? Or did you just do a high level, quick Google thing? Like, oh yeah, you need a password thing. Yeah, but what though? Like, what are you talking about? Like specifically, right? You know, that kind of stuff, right? So do a deep dive analysis. Say, okay, based upon our environment, our technology, our data, right? What specifically then would you recommend to mitigate this risk? Because that's what you're going to do with all other employers, right? Or even your own business when you open up one, if that's your plan and goal, right? You need to do exactly, you know, you need to stand up stuff, policy for all of it, right? So anyways, you guys are awesome. I appreciate your time tonight. This was definitely recorded. I believe I did hit the record button. So not going to let you fall. Okay, so I need you to know that. I'm not going to let you fall. Okay, so I need you to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Okay, and just ask away. Like Chris has been asking away, which is awesome. So just ask.
I got a million more questions, but I'll ask you some other time later. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no worries. You're welcome to ask. You can put them in the chat, right? You can put them wherever. So anytime we need to do this, because that's what I always do. I hit it off at the pass. Anytime there's a problem, I don't wait. I just like, look, let's just do a group huddle. Let's talk about it, right? So everybody's on the same sheet of music and we're good. I'm about that. I just hit it off at the pass and that's the way I roll. I take immediate action. So all right, recording when it's available. And you let me know how we can continue to improve upon our ability to provide services to you, right? And all I ask you is just to dive in, do what you need to do and ask questions, ask away. Don't worry about perfection, please. Okay, don't worry about perfection. I know I sound like a broken record, but I mean that because that is realizing, and that's what happened to a lot of the folks last time, is I'm not ready for my presentation. I don't have it done yet. I don't have this. I don't have it right yet. I don't have it. No. There's never going to be, it's never going to be perfect. We're humans. It doesn't work like that. Even with AI, it doesn't work like that. Right. So the quicker you can just, and again, we'll help you, we'll help you navigate through that. And the first time you do it, you'd be like so flipping nervous. And then it gets easier and easier and easier as you continue to do it. And some people continue to practice time and time and time again, even though they had just presented the which is awesome. So, and you guys can do that too. All right. I will quit talking. Any final alibis or anything before we conclude today? Okay. Is everyone clear on next steps? So what are we going to do?
Assign the controls.
Assign the controls. Yes, everybody should have controls assigned. It doesn't have to be perfect or pretty. Everybody should have something assigned, a control or multiple controls. And then tomorrow, and then, you guys should be diving into the CIS CSAT dashboard then. And then you can ask questions from there. What does this mean? What does that mean? I'm not understanding this. That's what I want the conversation to be tomorrow night. So then you have a way forward, right, in the next week and a half. So the next ITCCB, it's like, then you have some content, right? You have some stuff that's like, yeah, this is the analyses. I'm not sure you're booking meetings too, who you need to book with, right? As if it's with me directly or something concerning control that I own or whatever, or if it's the SOC member of the SOC team because it's a SOC related control, right? Then that can be facilitated between now and next Friday. So then you have something to brief them next Friday, right? All right,
Hey,
so I will be quiet. You guys, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. If anybody else wants to go, I just have one question. I don't want to hold everybody up.
You're good. Ask away. Ask
Okay.
away. I think you're the only one asking questions, and that's okay too.
So, I already have everybody assigned to a control or multiple controls. But like I said, I have to add in the PE thing now, and that's going to complicate things a little bit more as far as the timing of things. But I just wanted to know if I can go ahead and assign the controls that I already have assigned to people. So when the briefing comes to, cool, you got it.
Yep. Excellent. And great questions. And again, I guarantee everyone else has similar questions. So I hope I'm not intimidating. That's why I also stepped away a little bit too. And some of those ITCCBs, I kind of stepped away a little bit because I felt that maybe me being there, like people were intimidated. I'm not judging anybody. This is all a learning environment, right? Everybody's learning. So that's all I want you to do is dive in. That's all I ask, that's all I ask. Not hard, right? I mean, as far as diving in, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to trip all over yourselves. And it's normal to have imposter syndrome like crazy and be so confused for a while. It'll come like a couple weeks from now after you've at least gotten your first control done, if you will, and analyzed and done your presentation. It's like, that's what she was talking about. That's not so hard after all. Right? That's what you're going to be saying in a couple weeks. Right? So
I believe it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think you're awesome. Thank you for speaking up. And does anyone else have any other questions before we conclude today? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the meeting. It's recorded. Okay, so I will share out the link when it becomes available. And feel free to ping me if you need me or any one of us here. We're more than willing to help you. Okay. All right. Enjoy the rest of your evening. See you tomorrow night. See you tomorrow night.
See you tomorrow night. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye, Anna.
Bye.
Good night.